So basically, they're the same spell under these circumstances, except one is arcane and one is divine. And as far as counterspelling is concerned, there's no difference. There's probably differences in execution of the spells in everyday life, but for this purpose. So death. You fall unconscious at 0 hit points or less. From now on, I have made very few edits, and we'll probably be making them live as we speak, and then I might share them in the other thing and show you if I feel like it's important. You fall unconscious at 0 hit points or less and are dying. If you take damage until you reach your bloodied value, it should probably be equal to or greater than, I imagine. If you take damage equal to or greater than your bloodied value as a negative integer, you die. If you are dying, you must make a... you die. If you take your maximum hit points as a negative integer, you are destroyed utterly. That makes it a lot harder to res you. That's why it's worded that way. If you are dying, you must make a save every round against death. Death acting as a keyword in this instance. And take 1 damage if you fail. So, I have a hard time trying to explain to people what a save is in this system. And yet, a death save is its own thing outside of the 5th edition ability saves. I wouldn't think it would be that weird, but people still think of the defenses in terms of saves, which is how it worked in 3rd edition and in Pathfinder. And so they'll be like, what save? Do you mean a fortitude? And I'm like, no, that's a defense. That's why I don't say fortitude save. Or I try very hard not to. It's not to say that I don't make mistakes from time to time. But a death save is a save with the death keyword. Whereas in 5th edition, saves are keyed to ability scores except death, which is keyed to death. Which, if you think about it, makes death an ability.
It's a very important ability. All living beings have the ability death.
Well, not all, but the vast majority. And the overwhelming majority. And, I mean, players are dulling it out all the time. If anybody has a death ability, it's fucking player characters. They're constantly causing death to happen to stuff. It seems to be most of what they do. Anyway, but it is really weird to have to deal with death in this case, in this way, because of how the rules, like, it's almost like fear of death itself keeps people from accepting the nature of the death save. Or something like that. The memento mori is unwelcome either. Yeah. So let's see here. If you are dying, you must make a save every round against death. Death acting is a keyword. So there are, when I say a keyword, there are abilities that make things happen specifically to do with death or death saving throws in the game. And then death applies as a keyword in that instance as well. And that's why that might be an important way to think about it. Otherwise, it would be like, a death save is a specific thing, which is very inside baseball. Even trying to describe how those things are different means that you have to have your head in the game of linguistics used for game design. And I don't think most people do. Which is probably a big part of why I'm having such a hard time making the point out of it. Anyway, if you fail 3 during the same instance of entering the dying state, your character is dead. I don't mention anything about stabilizing if you pass 3. I've been doing it that way. But the way it's written right here, unless somebody does something to give you HP, eventually you die. Because you don't succeed at 3 and stabilize, rules is written. You succeed at 3, you keep rolling until you fail 3 times and die. If you succeed 108 times, you keep rolling until you die, unless something saves you. Which is a little more realistic. That is not what I've been doing. I don't know, maybe players are going to have to decide. Do they think that the system of rules should lighten up and I should go the 5th edition direction, especially considering that that's how I play it? Or is it more fruitful to have it be, 1, different from 5th edition, and 2, I would argue, much more realistic? It's not very often that somebody just stabilizes from a dying state. Usually they bleed out and die. I don't know, because the thing about that is, it being mathematically impossible to recover also doesn't seem that realistic. Because people do survive some amazing shit. Humans have a whole thing about drowning, is an example that comes to mind. Because humans autonomically push water out of the lungs when they're unconscious, which is fucking awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know about how doctors put your organs back in?
How?
They just put them back in.
They just put them back in.
Like they don't have to be careful. See, they take them out and they have to put them on hooks because they're wiggling everywhere.
Yeah.
And then after they're done doing what they're doing, they take them off the hooks, just put them in, and the organs just wriggle themselves back into place.
Oh my god. See, like, there's a lot of weird shit that we do that has to do with our survival.
See,
There's
when
a lot
I
of nuance in
back
natural
in, you were like, yeah, of course they just put them back in. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
They don't. They just put them back in.
Yeah, and then they work themselves into place. That's crazy sauce. Gyrations and whatnot, vibrating. All right, maybe I think I've convinced myself. I've convinced myself again to default to the 5th edition version. What is this? Conscript says, just concerned that most players don't have methods of healing yet, unless they're a healing class or potion. Well, you can heal with the skill. The skill, but most of what the skill is for is to rescue somebody from dying, which is hilarious because a single healing spell just ends that, and they just get up and they're just going again. Although probably not for long. It's only the last hit point that really matters, but sometimes it's really easy for somebody to take that last hit point away. So it all depends. Giving them another hit point so that they get up doesn't mean that they're going to be up forever. Yeah, I think that I've convinced myself that even the argument of realism doesn't really work. So the better argument of let's play fucking craps wins again, which is hard to beat because throwing dice is fun. Throw the bones, motherfucker. Do you live or die? Character survives.
I laugh because it's true.
Character makes 3 saves. They stabilize.
Oh yeah, Lampede, I have a question for you. That is completely not related to what you're talking about. If a mod I have on Skyrim updates, do I have to go in and re-download? Way of the Monk updated today.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Do I have to go in and reload it?
Probably.
Okay.
I think that nowadays, check the launcher, or not the launcher, the mod manager. A lot of times nowadays, the mod manager just has an update button. It might even have an update prompt where it's like, hey, this thing has an update. You want to update it? Like, it is way easier nowadays, dude. When I first started playing Skyrim and getting mods for it, it was hell on earth every time the game patched. It was just the worst. Oh, now there's 6 people watching us? That's too many people.
Well, it's because I mentioned Skyrim, you see.
You said the word Skyrim and suddenly 2 more people joined. Okay. I mean, we're gonna do the Skyrim show, and it's gonna be amazing. It might not be good, but it will amaze people. I'm looking forward to it. Anyhow, when are we gonna be doing that, by the way? I've been tempted to try and suggest Thursdays until Professor Crowley shows back up. I don't know how long that'll be. But then I'm a little trepidatious about just picking a day that we're going to have to move anyhow. Friday might be easier because we could theoretically run later.
I have Fridays open now because my Friday game got moved to today and then was delayed until 7:30, which is why I'm on stream with you right now.
Oh, I see. Well,
it was canceled. It's just are in town. Not mine, other people's.
Yeah. Okay. So we've covered death, and there's been an update to death, right? Because now I've canonized that whole multiple saves thing. And now we're going to do defensive fighting. So defensive fighting, this is one of the major elements of this game. This has to do with how the game's action economy is unique. How it is, I feel like, the cure to the bonus action dilemma in 5th edition. Defensive fighting is like probably most people's default final minor action. Like they do something during their turn and it's like, oh, I have a minor action left. What would I do with that? And the answer is usually a skill check or defensive fighting. But you've got to know defensive fighting exists. Because it is a rule in the game, but it's not something that most people are going to be actively aware of unless they've seen it or been told. So defensive fighting, when you are focused on defense, you expend a minor action at the beginning of your turn. I haven't been policing that. I've been allowing people to do it at the end. In fact, I think I'm changing it to that. Yes, I'm getting rid of that limitation. You expend a minor action to receive +2 to armor class and +1 to fortitude, reflex, and will until the beginning of your next turn if you haven't moved more than one space. It's another thing where you have to have not moved in order to do defensive fighting. I don't think I like that. And I have definitely had people on stream move and go into defense. I think I want to embrace the minor actions, and I want defensive fighting to be a way to do that, even though people are going to start defaulting to defensive fighting when they should be using their minor actions for skills, because they're not thinking about it.
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Something you might consider is limiting movement if they are fighting defensively, because if you're on the defensive, you're not like running out full tilt. That's kind of the thing.
Yeah,
right?
But they already have, haven't they?
Well, they already have.
Yeah, because they could have sacrificed the minor action to move again, and they didn't. So, in a manner of speaking, that's already happened. Because remember, that's how you do extra movement in this game. Whereas, if instead of taking the action that they would have spent moving around to focus on lying to somebody, they don't get their defense bonus because they were too busy lying, and they're rolling that bluff shit, you know?
You do make a good point. I was going to say something along the line. Weirdly enough, this is not a thing from Pathfinder. This is a thing from Yu-Gi-Oh, but don't worry about it. My brain assumes that, you turn on defense. I put it in defense mode. I'm in defense mode now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And if that was the case, as so long as defense mode is on, you should be moving at like half speed. But that's not what's going on here. I mean, and I need to remind myself of that.
But you are, though. You are moving at half speed because you're sacrificing one of your move actions to do it. That's
Indeed.
Exactly what's happening already. So I don't need this haven't moved more than one space nonsense.
Well, I was going to say like half movement, but if we're expending the minor every single round of defensive fighting, then it does effectively make it half movement.
Well, there's also total defense, right? When defensive fighting, you may choose to use the standard action instead of a minor. An enemy attacking you has disadvantage. So this also doesn't necessarily limit their movement, but they literally cannot attack. I mean, they could. There are certain characters that could. Like the Zealot Warlord can make an attack at disadvantage as a minor action. But their enemy is attacking at disadvantage as well because they're in total defense, right? So that's fair, even though it's an exception to the rule already. So yeah, any enemy attacking you has disadvantage, but you also have, while fighting defensively, right? You can choose a standard action instead of a minor. So you're still getting the +2 armor class, +1 fortitude reflex and roll.
I just realized this would be a great thing to do with a certain someone that has a rhino companion and too many minor action utilities. If they use their standard to go into total defense, then they're just using their minors like they would normally.
Yeah, like I have mages do it a lot too, because the mage will cast a spell, they'll move into just the perfect position, which might be pretty far, so it might be a double move. Cast the perfect spell for the situation, and then on their next turn, they use a minor action to sustain the effect, use their standard action to do total defense, and then they still have a minor action left to intimidate somebody, or to do something like somebody gets something where they can. The mana focus power, where they can up the level of the next spell that they cast before the end of their next turn for a minor action on this turn. That's powerful shit. That's super dangerous. I don't want to fight that mage. But if you are going to fight him, you're going to need advantage to neutralize the disadvantage before you attack them, right? So that's a way that spellcasters can be more than just butter spread over bread, which is something that tends to happen at low levels. You can pick too many things that do minor actions. You absolutely can.
You still need to use the minor actions.
Yeah, but if you hold still, you get 2 of them. In fact, if you're willing to sacrifice your standard, you get 3. That's not something you can do in 5th edition. In 5th edition, if you have too many things that require bonus actions, you just have to fucking pick one.
I do think it's a thing you can do in Pathfinder 2, but I'm not sure if they have big actions and little actions anymore. I think just have actions.
Yeah, from what I understand, what they're doing with Pathfinder 2 is that there's basically 3 actions that you take and you choose what those actions are, which is a lot closer to this method. And I'm not sure which of these 2 methods I would prefer. I would guess this one, because there are going to be so many features that revolve around particular types of actions, but it would also be harder to learn because of that than Pathfinder 2 would be. But then there's other things about Pathfinder 2, like there's nothing tied to the type of action you take making the attacks problematic. It's the number of attacks you make in a single turn. And then that rule isn't necessarily part of the action economy itself. It's more like it's something hard bound into what an attack is and how it works if you make multiples, which is really peculiar. So I guess it kind of depends. It might be 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I haven't played Pathfinder 2 yet, but I think I would quite like to. I'm just not sure when we're going to find a way to have time to do it.
I mean, if you wanted, and we wanted to bother getting everything. I haven't gotten anything since the original playtest, but I'd be willing to DM Pathfinder 2.
Okay.
Guess who's a Pathfinder bitch? Bitch.
For sure. I have to warn you, I've heard that some of the way that some of the stuff is written, looking up information is quite complicated. So you'll probably want a PDF, so it's searchable. Yeah, justify choices, half minors, or setup. Yeah, a lot of things are like that. Like, a lot of the minor action economy, as far as the class features are concerned, is about you use a minor action to prepare for the next thing you do. Hell, in some cases, you use a standard action to prepare for the next thing you do. So a lot of feats are like that too. But then there are also feats that are reactive. Like Columnscript's character, Bellathor, has Rapid Shot. And Rapid Shot is a minor action that reacts to his own standard action. So if in his standard action he fires a shot, he gets to use the minor action to fire another one. But he has to have done so in order to get the second one, right? He can't use the minor action to fire a shot willy-nilly. And then his bow is speedy, so he can do all 3 in one round. But in order to make the subsequent 2, he has to have fired the first standard action 1. Whereas there's a lot of other stuff where it's like Is it the aim feat does it, where you get a +2 from, I think, a minor. That might even be a standard. Somebody gets something, whereas a minor action, they get a +2 to the next attack roll that they make. So that one's the other way around. Because if you do it at the end of your turn, it might even say before the end of the turn. So you have to, if that's the case, you'd have to use that minor action at the beginning of the turn. In order to get the bonus to an attack you have to make during that turn. So if an immediate interrupt somebody uses stops you from doing it, you've wasted a minor action that you might have been able to spend doing something else, and you wouldn't even know that was coming. Like some of the riposte stuff are immediate interrupts that cancel attacks. That would suck. There's a rogue ability that does that. Can set up mode, spirit bird, and action. Yeah, see, that's another one too. Summonses and stuff like that. But once you're dealing with anything that adds stuff to the board, the game gets more complicated anyway. And that's something we all just have to live with. I would argue that this is still smoother than 5th edition with a summoner. Because 5th edition with a summoner really does just give somebody else more turns. I'm not okay with it. I mean, I've got enough problems with one person taking too long to take their turns, you know? I don't want 4 people at the table to be sitting around while one person's like, maybe I'll summon another osprey. And then it will have a turn. I have definitely played games where that shit was a problem. I've had villains do it, and then I just had him taper the turn. So the creatures had turns, even though technically they should all have been going on the summoner's turn, because the summoner was the bad guy. But that also gives the illusion of a more complete combat, which 4th edition was sort of into, that sort of thing, but it was still set up so that it was assumed that all of the extra attacks the enemy would make, they would make on their turn, except for reactions to damage and immediate interrupts like that. All right, engaging. So this one here we've had some problems with, and this one might need to be dealt with in some way. Something might need to be done. Well, I don't care about that. Stop at me with that shit. Okay, engaging can be problematic. And the way that engagement works versus attacks of opportunities in general, and a number of other problems. But basically, how it works right now, if a creature is targeted with a melee attack, they are engaged in melee with that opponent. I've actually also been having it if they target the opponent with a melee attack, that opponent has engaged them. Although that doesn't look like it's what it says rules is written. If they are marked by an opponent that they are adjacent to, they are also engaged. So if you mark a target, you have automatically engaged them. Although the most common marking power in the game is the fighter thing. And the fighter automatically engages somebody, or automatically marks somebody when they target them with a melee attack. So they would already have engaged them anyhow. But the Barbarian's Thunder Shout is a lot more powerful if you take this into consideration. Because it means that when the Barbarian marks every adjacent target that can hear them, then they're also engaging those targets. And if those targets try to move away from the Barbarian, they provoke an attack of opportunity. And the Barbarian just did a minor action to get that. If you use Fairy Fire on somebody who is adjacent to you, I think that even provokes an attack of opportunity, so maybe you wouldn't. But then you have engaged them as well. So you can attack one target, so you've engaged them, then as a Gish. Like teleport in with your move action. With your standard action, attack someone with a melee attack that engages them, and then provoke an attack of opportunity by casting Fairy Fire on an adjacent enemy, which marks them, and you have engaged them as well. And so now, none of them can move away from the guy who just teleported in that they weren't expecting without without provoking attacks of opportunity. And then, somebody who has I get bonuses to attacks of opportunities. And that's extremely tactical. Exhaustion. People require adequate rest after 24 hours without an extended rest, or 5 days with only extended rest rather than proper sleep. Okay, yeah. Characters become fatigued and receive a -2 penalty on saves and skill rolls. This has happened like once, and it was in the very early stages of testing this game. And it was when Matt and his party were just fucking around in the wilderness non-stop for days. And they, like, ran out of ammunition, even though I had the new ammunition rules and stuff. And they just went, motherfucker. They didn't, no breaks, no sleep, just no sleep till Brooklyn. And then they got there with, like, an arrow, needing to buy new shoes, totally exhausted, minus 4 to everything. But let's see. If an effect would cause fatigue or exhaustion when characters are already in such a state, leave them innervated. What? Effects that would cause fatigue or exhaustion when characters are already in such a state, leaves them innervated. That should be an S, right? Am I crazy?
Repeat the sentence.
Effects that would cause fatigue or exhaustion when characters are already in such a state, leave them innervated. Should it be leave them innervated or leaves them innervated? I think it's leave, because it's plural, right?
I mean, yeah, it's just... I think this is one of those edge cases where it could be either.
Anyway, they also suffered a disadvantage. Effects that would cause fatigue or exhaustion when characters are already innervated, render them unconscious. Notice characters with a trance feat are not subject to the 5-day without proper sleep clause. So... here's the thing. There are spells that do this. So what this has effectively done is it has created what's called a track. Fear has a track. There's a fear track. Demeanor has a track. There's a demeanor track. And exhaustion has a track. There's an exhaustion track. The exhaustion track is normal, fatigued, exhausted, innervated, and unconscious. And fear is shaken, afraid, terrified. Did I miss one earlier? Shaken, afraid, terrified. I don't remember. Anyway, it's right here. It's literally on the same page. Certain effects bestow conditions which can cause an increase in the fear of the subject. Many effects which would bestow the shaken condition can further bestow additional fear and affect creatures thusly. If a power bestows a shaken condition and the rule does not specify otherwise, the creature's condition increases along the fear track. A shaken creature becomes frightened. A frightened creature cannot approach the source of the condition. A frightened subject becomes panicked. That's the one I missed. Panicked creature must use at least one move action to move away from the source of the condition. A panicked creature becomes stunned. Oh, so the fourth one's not fear specific. It's just they gain the stunned condition. The subject also has the previous conditions as they advance. So they're stunned, and even if they are no longer stunned, they will still move away from the source of the creature because they are panicked. That also means, even though the way that it's written it might be easy to overlook, that a frightened creature still has the -2 penalty, and a panicked creature still cannot take a move action toward the opponent, even though they should be using at least one action to move away. Otherwise, a panicked creature could technically otherwise move away from the source of their panic and then move back toward it by sacrificing their minor action. You're not allowed to do that. Don't do that. You're breaking the rules. And then the demeanor track, which is probably in here somewhere, and we might come to it, we might not, so I'm going to tell you anyway, is passive. Is it passive? No, it starts in a different, because they don't care. They may or may not acknowledge your existence, whatever. You're there. And then it can go up or down from that neutral state. And if the demeanor improves, then they become friendly. And then theoretically, there's something beyond friendly, which is how love potions work, for example. But there's nothing set that makes that the case. There's nothing that explicitly says that if you go from friendship to above friendship, then it generates love or whatever. So that may or may not work in game depending on the situation. Whereas going down, it becomes untrusting and then hostile. So all creatures that are already trying to kill you, that you're already fighting with, are in the hostile demeanor. And there are spells that can change that, and abilities. Like druids have, like Bach. Bach has an ability where if what they're fighting is technically an animal, then they can take this action in order to neutralize the hostility of the animal against them. If any of their allies continue fighting the creature, then it'll have been wasted. But otherwise, it's a way of dealing with that. It's a way of making it so that you don't necessarily have to fight them. Okay. I suspect shit's about to get really weird. So before I start reading this and confusing everybody with my gibberish, I'm going to explain what experience represents in these games is not an alternative to treasure that operates in the form of collecting rewards for killing stuff until something happens. I think that despite it being fun, Diablo, as like a franchise, has fucked up the way people think about experience. All games are an abstraction of reality. You are abstracting something, even if it's ideological in nature. To you, it's some kind of reality. You are abstracting that into something that is represented by a system of rules, random die rolls, and interpersonal interaction. That includes experience being what leads to people learning how to do things. Your characters gain power because they are becoming more experienced. But XP, replacing experienced as a simulacrum, in the way that people think about these games, becomes a kind of weird, non-real, hyper-real abstraction of nothing. Abstraction of itself. And then people are running around saying, my XP is about to hit the point where I will ding, which is a colloquialism for gaining a level. And then when you ding, immediately within the situation that you're in, you suddenly have maximum hit points. All of the things that you have been dealing with that are finite are suddenly again at maximum in a moment during combat. Nobody who is learning something gets hit in the head with a hammer during a kung fu fight and then learns construction.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that's hilarious though.
I mean, yeah.
I would play the game.
Well, here's the other thing too. I'm not saying that's not cool. Diablo rocks. I really had a lot of fun playing the Diablo games. I think they're awesome. But when that's how you're trying to think about Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not even sure how to begin telling you how wrong you are. Because you've applied a simulacrum of a simulacrum when what we were starting with was real. There's no reality for you.
That's the reason why with Cog's turn, when I'm like, okay, I want her to be able to take that ability to, make the Thunderstones and the Alchemist Fires and whatnot.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna go train with Igor.
Yes.
2 levels before that.
Yes.
So I can practice those skills off screen and semi-on screen. So that, I'm practicing them. Because it's always really weird when your character's going along doing something, and suddenly your fighter is taking levels in Wizard without ever...
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I'm with you there. But here's the thing.
Now, the other way around makes more sense, because, your fighter's been being hit in the head. Or your wizard's been being hit in the head, and learning to dodge is pretty cool.
So, anyway, all of this is true. Experience is... Well, the engineer, which is to say alchemist, is the perfect class for explaining downtime. Because downtime is what they're all about. during their downtime, they produce new things, right? The old school 3rd edition / the Pathfinder magic item manufacturer, right? That kind of character, the wizard who takes craft magic item in 3rd edition and spends two of the levels that they don't get a gain while everybody else is gaining levels because they're spending all their experience making the magic items. Ho-hum. That motherfucker is also a huge downtime character because it's what they're doing in their downtime that actually matters to the game. And that's what can help open people's eyes to that, rather than have them do this Path of Exile thing, right? But your character is learning from what's going on around you. Experience points abstract that learning, usually I'm gonna need more coffee. Usually in a way that is what's the word I'm looking for? They abstract that learning in a way that's numerical. So there's numbers that represent learning. I fundamentally disagree with every way that anybody's ever done that, because it sucks. The easiest I've ever worked with was there was a variation. What game was that? I think it might even have been a D&D house rule or something. But it was like the amount of experience you needed to gain a level was 100 times your level. So it was 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And the way that they awarded the experience was done in-house. Oh, yeah, I think it was a house rule. Because they hated challenge rating, which is the correct thing to do. You should hate challenge rating, it's bad. It's confusing, nonsensical, and Mike Marles himself has admitted he doesn't use it. And neither does Jeremy Crawford. They wrote the damn rule. Like, it wasn't good before, it's not good now. I don't know why they went back. 4th edition did a lot of things wrong. Very, very wrong. But the way that it did levels for magic, monsters, and experience points was perfect. There was no simpler way of doing it. And even though 5th edition was supposed to be about making the game more simple, they didn't use those rules, and they really should have. Anyway, I did. Except that in that point, I was like, well, so this monster is a level, and you're a level, and that means it's worth a seemingly arbitrary amount of math, and that math is based on what level the person is versus the level of the monster. And the level of the person, level of the monster just happens to coincide mathematically in such a way the challenge rating shouldn't have mattered. But I was thinking, if I'm doing all that shit anyway, the point is, the experience that your character gains from completing whatever the challenge was is what generates experience. We know what the amount of experience is as a percentage, right? That's sort of what it comes down to. What percentage is this monster worth at the next level for this character? And everything else was just a way of getting around asking that question. So I just asked that question directly. And once I realized that, I was like, well, I don't need 100. I don't need 100. That's arbitrary. I can do 10. And so right now, the way that this game is played, you might give somebody a 0.5. I never do. But if a person doesn't experience a challenge that's worth at least 1 point, fuck them. They don't deserve it. They didn't learn anything. If they go through what you can expect to be a normal encounter for their level, that's probably an experience point. That's all the harder it really is. And I know that also seems totally arbitrary. But the others always really were. The monster's challenge rating is partially arbitrary, and there's whole forums devoted to how randomly different the provably arbitrary decision in the difference in challenge rating really was. So you might as well do it up front. You might as well just come in and say we're going to be arbitrary, instead of making it look like there's a legitimizing mathematical system, which is itself based on arbitrariness just to confuse people.
Yeah.
You get a level when you get 10 experience. It's that easy. That experience is generated by the challenge the characters overcome. If the characters are of varying levels, it can get kind of weird. But a low-level character who does very little to be effective against a challenge which is above their pay grade has probably learned a great deal. Whereas somebody who's a little too powerful for the situation compared to everybody else probably didn't learn much. But you can still neutralize that into the group itself basically learned how to work together. That's an important thing we don't think about too. That goes right back to the basic neoliberal bullshit, right? If we're so busy thinking about how much experience our character's going to gain, we're not thinking about how well a team learns to work together. Somebody who is 4 levels higher than the trainee or the PC playing a character that doesn't have a whole level yet because we're in Austria or whatever it might be, that character is learning a hell of a lot more from trying to keep this poor bastard alive and teaching them, you know, basic shit that might not even be discussed in character because they're part of the same party and they're learning from each other in this instance. And that poor bastard, who's going to be completely useless in this whole fight, is probably learning more by being in the same team as this motherfucker who's level 4 or 5 or whatever it is, going through whatever they're going through. So it still makes sense. And it still comes out to something like, if this is a reasonable challenge at this level, an encounter at this level, it's 1 experience. If it's an unreasonable one, maybe it's 2 experience, but you should probably have lost a couple of people. And sometimes it's not 1 encounter. Like, the final battle against the Black 3, that was like 5 encounters. And one of them was the party, because the party brought an encounter with them, in the form of Ultus the Cultist, Mortlock Vanthamper. Who else did you guys seduce? Did one of the people that Miriam hired actually follow you? I think one of them might have. No, because you didn't lose anybody on your end. And then another encounter broke in to the fight in the middle of it. So you don't have to do things in terms of just thinking in single encounters, but it's a lot easier. And that so far the DMs Whatsit literally only goes over that. It's like, this is an encounter, this is what it's worth, this is how it works, this is how you generate it vis-a-vis monsters, and that's all I've had to say about it. I would need a whole section on what the fuck happened in Avernus in that one battle, because that battle was fucking balls. Like, it was crazy sauce. Actually, I say it was balls. It actually went about as well as it could have. I really do think that, because for as many mistakes as we made and as much guff as we were giving each other, there was arguments over whether or not Abbott was killing enough people. Really fucking whirlwind death storm that character is. But I don't think it could have come out better than it did regardless. I think that was the best we were going to do. And it was fucking awesome. It still blows me away that Mackenzie saved everyone. Nobody died. Anyhow, that's worth a hell of a lot more than 1 experience. That's worth more than 2 experience. And they'd already supposedly banked up quite a bit of experience because I was doing, I forgot the word again. I forgot it just yesterday. We were all talking about that. Oh, come on. Milestones. Milestones. Because we were using milestones. And at that point I was like, because I was using milestones and they did all this weird shit that I didn't really account for, some of which by the time they were out of the dungeon I'd forgotten about. I was like, they need to be rewarded for all that weird shit. And so I wound up just having them skip a level, which I don't recommend ever. Because it's hard enough to get used to your character. If characters level too quickly, that's something I haven't necessarily said here. If characters level too quickly, players won't know how to play them, because they'll have things they're not used to using. In fact, players always have something they're not used to using. That's sort of how the game works. By the time you're used to it, you level up again. Yes, milestone. Thank you, Cogscript. Unfortunately, lag, etc. But yeah, so a subject may receive 0.5 for something mildly interesting but not necessarily challenging. I've never done that, but I like having it around in case somebody needs to do something with it. Each combat encounter... Why did I say combat specifically? It should just be encounter. Because not all encounters, of course, are combat. And you get XP for other things. Traps and puzzles are the other ones. It even says that down here. I didn't even mention skill challenges, and that's in here too. That needs to be thought about. Anyway, each combat encounter of their level, a subject overcomes after another encounter, includes trap rooms, skill challenges, puzzle rooms, role-playing scenarios, basically anything the DM awards XP for. Without an extended rest, they gain 2 XP instead of 1. Okay, since I got rid of combat, though, this can be worded very differently and in a much more feasible way, or in a much easier to understand way. Each encounter of their level, a subject overcomes after another encounter. Just cut all of this. Without an extended rest. For each encounter of their level, a subject overcomes after another encounter with an extended rest. They gain 2 XP instead of 1. Did I already say what a... let's see here. When a group completes a challenge, they get experience points each time a subject overcomes an encounter. This is called an encounter. There. I've invented a thing. It's codified in the system, rather than referring to something that didn't exist within the system. It doesn't have its own section. It doesn't need one. At least, not yet. Each time a subject overcomes an encounter of their level, challenge specifically equal to the available resources to which several battle or one big one available to formula for DM's materials, they gain an experience point. Using available formula from the DM materials. Why did I say that? I literally codified. What is that word? Procrastinating. I literally codified procrastinating. I should not have done that. Well, maybe. I'm just going to go in here and say... See encounters in the DM's Whatsit for more information, period. Overcomes an encounter of their level, they gain 1 experience point. See encounters in the DM's Whatsit for more information. Awesome. A DM may give or withhold the point or a fraction based on discretion. If something is not reasonably challenging, it is not rewarded with XP. You didn't learn anything to increase your power. A subject may receive 0.5 for something mildly interesting, but not necessarily. Okay. Oh shit, the thing I cut is gone. I'm always doing that.
So, this is kind of an aside, and it probably doesn't matter. But, if you walk a long way and do a lot of exercise, aka you're practicing what you already know, but don't necessarily, learn anything new, is that also XP? After all, practice makes perfect.
Well, it's not on its own. That's not an encounter by itself. For these purposes, an encounter may be trap rooms, skill challenges, puzzles, role-playing scenarios, basically anything the DM awards XP for.
Like, I'm not entirely sure it would matter for, like, your game. But it's an interesting question of, if the wizard tags along, but they're not able to cast a spell, do they get the same XP as the fighter, who was able to just murder the guy in one round because you as the DM did not exactly foresee?
I don't think I understand the question, but if they're working as a team anyway, then it shouldn't matter because they should be sharing the burden.
I'm just thinking of edge cases, because, sooner or later the edge case will in fact show up, and it will fuck you over.
In all likelihood.
Yeah.
Alright. Alright, how much more of this is there?
Okay.
Attacks, special attacks. And special attacks need work. So if I'm going to divide this in half, where would I do it? Uh, 17. Seven. Wait, what did I do wrong? Six. So 13. Alright, so this is probably going to be our last page, and then we're going to raid Diesel Shop.
Cool.
Don't anybody leave. Every time people leave before I raid, leave after. There's abandoning somebody after a raid is the kind of bullshit that everybody does, whereas abandoning somebody before a raid is the kind of bullshit only an asshole does. All right, grappling. Okay. Grappling is now, and has always been, and probably always will be, a right son of a bitch. The thing about grappling is it's something that everybody needs to be able to address in a game for many reasons, not least of all, not least of which is the fact that there are people who do it. The existence of the monk, complicates things in that regard as well. So what do you do, right? What are you going to do when you're having to deal with the fact that somebody is going to be using a different combat system in order to fight under certain circumstances, if not as often as they can? Third edition's response was to write its own rule book specifically for how people wrestle. Or horses, or krakens, because there were rules for that. I know how that sounds. I know you think that I'm using Reductio ad absurdum to attack third edition. It's literally true.
You're right.
It's literally true.
Okay, just to be clear, I one time played a game where a guy did in fact decide to go full brawler, and he did in fact wrestle a kraken to death.
Yeah.
So trust me, I know all about these rules.
Yeah, it's fucking stupid. In fourth edition or in third edition, horses have 4 legs, so they have a +8 circumstance bonus to grappling. They don't have hands, so they can't initiate a grapple. They don't have any limbs that they don't use to stand on, so they can't grapple. But if somebody does grapple them, they get a +8 and win that grapple. And that makes sense to someone somewhere.
Well, that's because it makes sense. Have you ever tried to grapple a horse?
I mean, there's usually a rope involved, and grappling a horse with a rope's not that hard. But then, are you using the same rules if you grapple with a horse, or if you grapple with a rope? Because there's definitely ropes. There's a spell for a rope, right? And there's whips, and there's all kinds of stuff where shit like that's happening. Do those count for grappling? And if so, how? So, how I decided I would do it was to make grabbing a special attack leading to a grabbed condition which has certain rules. And then above that, the grappling stuff takes place afterward. So grappling can occur when a target is grabbed. A grabbed target is immobilized. That's not true. They have half movement. A grabbed creature can make attacks normally. Do I want to keep them immobilized or change it to the half movement? Just because somebody's wrestling with you doesn't mean you can't move. Yeah, I think I'm pulling the trigger on it. It's not immobilized, it's half movement. I grabbed a creature which is grabbing another or is grabbed has half movement. A grabbed creature can make attacks normally. Okay, now, the thing about immobilization may be incurred by the following sections, instead of just being built into somebody being grabbed. A subject can attempt to escape or control the grapple with a minor action, twice in one turn for a double move. Why did I call it a double move? That doesn't make any sense. And it's superfluous. You don't need to say that. Because it's a minor action and you can sacrifice your move action for a minor action. In fact, you might as well. A subject can attempt to escape or control the grapple with a minor action by making an acrobatic skill or athletic skill check against that of the opponent. All movement during a grapple is halved. A character that has grabbed an opponent can use a standard action to grapple the subject. The controller can choose to end the grapple, deal strength modifier damage to the other grappler, or attempt another such check to throw down the opponent, which, if successful, allows you to slide the target one space and they land prone. The subject in control of the grapple can move. All movement during the grapple is halved, bringing the held subject with them. The controller may pin the opponent to prevent them from making attacks. A pinned opponent is essentially considered to be prone. And so, should they be immobilized when they are in the grapple? Or should we save it until they're prone? Or, I mean, pinned.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. I think that there's... I hate this because it complicates it. There should be 2 levels of grappling.
Oh no, we're definitely doing that. Yeah, these are going to become subtypes that have their own thing. In fact,
like, if a gnome grabs a hold of my shoulders, I can just walk with the gnome, even if they have me grappled. But if they hit me in the back of the knee and somehow get ridiculous leverage on me, and I'm very, very confused about how this gnome has me on the floor and I can't move, then I can...
a monk level. It happens. Grab creature can make attacks. Okay, let's see. So, creature can make attacks. Because the grabbed condition is going to be written in conditions. A subject can attempt to escape or control the grapple. Half movement. Normally, a grabbed or the grabbing creature can initiate the grapple with a standard action.
Hell yeah.
Should it be a standard? I think it should be
grappling? Yeah.
It costs them a turn to turn grabbing somebody into a grapple.
Yeah.
Which causes a certain problem that I can fix right now.
Mainly, I don't think that you should be able to grapple someone and stab them in the same round with a dagger.
Well, I see what you mean, but you can't. Because you can't make attacks anymore once you're grappling. Instead, you deal strength modifier damage because you've done something to hurt the person when you are in control of the grapple. So that's grappling strike. I need the feat.
So if you're being grappled, you can, but if you're,
No. If you are grabbed. See, that's the reason why it has to be changed into things that have notable subtypes. There isn't... It's probably an improved grab, right? There's a grab but no grapple. currently in the feats. Improved grab, you get +2 to the grab attack action. Improved grab, +2 to the grab attack action. Yep, so there's going to be a new feat.